What Eddie Griffin just spilled about Malcolm Jamal Warner has left fans gagging and insiders sweating. For years, the dark truth behind Malcolm's troubled life, career, chaos, and heartbreaking end was tucked away, hidden in plain sight. But guess what? Eddie Griffin didn't just break his silence, he confirmed everything we were too scared to admit. And now, everything you thought you knew about Malcolm is about to change. Forever. Buckle up, because this rabbit hole is deeper than anyone ever dared to imagine. Malcolm Jamal Warner. Once the sweet, smiling child star of The Cosby Show, grew up right before America's eyes, charming, radiant, and full of promise. But we all know what happens when fame fades. Secrets start to build up and the real story comes tumbling out. And what Eddie Griffin just revealed? Well, it's not just jaw-dropping, it's downright chilling. This isn't petty shade, honey. Eddie is laying bare a truth that fans, insiders, and the media have ignored for years. In this video, we're diving headfirst into Eddie Griffin's bombshell comments. How they revealed the private pain Malcolm was carrying, the scandals that quietly shadowed him, and the eerie coincidence surrounding his final days. You won't believe the things that were swept under the rug, and how it all traces back to those closest to him. Get ready to uncover Malcolm Jamal Warner's deepest Hollywood struggles, the betrayals by the very people he trusted, and Eddie Griffin's unfiltered truth about what really went down behind the scenes, from hidden addictions to industry sabotage. Think you already know Malcolm's story? Oh honey, you're in for a shock. Buckle up, because by the time we're done, Malcolm Jamal Warner will look like a completely different person in your eyes. Before Eddie Griffin's shocking confession went viral, the world only knew Malcolm Jamal Warner as Theo Huxtable, the lovable, awkward teen from The Cosby Show, with his infectious smile, iconic style, and comedic timing that made him a star. Before he even hit 14, Malcolm was more than a TV character. He was a cultural phenomenon. The show didn't just get viewers, it changed the entire landscape of Black family representation on television. And guess who was at the heart of it? Malcolm. But here's where the story takes a turn. What most people didn't see was the weight of becoming America's favorite TV son, and the toll it took on Malcolm. He wasn't just a kid in front of the camera. He was a teenager trying to figure out who he was in a world that expected him to be perfect. A world that expected perfection, and behind the scenes, insiders revealed that Malcolm Jamal Warner was fighting to keep his own identity intact, especially while standing in the shadow of Bill Cosby, a man later unmasked for the very things Malcolm allegedly tried to distance himself from. For years, whispers from former cast members and producers hinted that Malcolm wasn't just dealing with fame. He was battling unseen struggles, avoiding the same traps that swallowed up so many young Black stars before him. And according to Eddie Griffin, what Malcolm faced behind closed doors left scars that never truly healed. Eddie Griffin called it a silent war, a fight Malcolm waged every single day on set. From power struggles to unspoken tensions with his co-stars, Malcolm wasn't just growing up in front of cameras, he was fighting to survive a toxic, exploitative system that demanded he smile through it all. But here's the kicker. Malcolm never spoke out. Not publicly. Not even when others around him began to crumble. Was he shielding someone? Or was he stuck in something darker than we ever imagined? Hold on tight, because in the next section, we're about to spill the tea. Eddie Griffin dropped that confirmed all the whispers and sent shockwaves through the entire entertainment industry. For years, Eddie Griffin kept his mouth shut, known for his raw comedy, unapologetic views on race, and his relentless calling out of Hollywood's hypocrisy. Eddie has always been the type to speak his mind unless he felt the timing wasn't right. But when he finally opened up about Malcolm Jamal Warner, the internet exploded. During a recent podcast that went viral in a matter of hours, Eddie was casually asked about the pressures faced by young Black actors in the industry. At first, his tone was cool, but then he stopped, looked straight into the camera, and hit us with the line that changed everything. Y'all don't even know what they did to Malcolm, man. And I ain't talking about career-wise. I'm talking soul-wise. That one sentence dropped like a bomb. The host, clearly taken aback, asked him to explain further. And Eddie, visibly emotional, revealed, Malcolm never wanted fame like that. That brother was caught in a storm and everybody turned their backs on him. You think he just faded into the background for no reason? Nah, it's way darker than that. No reason, nah, man. They shut him out emotionally, financially, spiritually. They did him dirty, and not a single soul said a word. Eddie Griffin didn't hold back, suggesting that Malcolm Jamal Warner's mental and emotional battles were a direct result of betrayal, not just from the industry, but from those he thought were family. While Eddie didn't drop names, fans quickly started making connections to Malcolm's fallout with certain castmates and producers after The Cosby Show wrapped. But here's the kicker. Eddie hit us with a chilling line that sent the internet into overdrive. That brother tried to warn us, but no one listened. Now look where he's at. And you better believe the speculation is real. Was Eddie hinting at a bigger industry cover-up? Or was he talking about something far more personal? Perhaps a cry for help that was swept under the rug by the very people who were supposed to have his back. And if you think it ends there, think again. Eddie Griffin dropped another bombshell. Malcolm had reached out to him years ago, confiding about feeling trapped, constantly watched, and like he was forced to prove that he wasn't just another part of their broken system. Who are they? Eddie Griffin didn't say directly, but fans quickly connected the dots, believing it was a reference to other fallen icons of the Erome, any of whom had their own legal issues and moral failings. In Eddie's own words, Malcolm Jamal Warner didn't want to end up like them. He wanted peace, and they made sure he never got it. This wasn't just a passing comment, though. Eddie Griffin confirmed what many fans feared, that Malcolm wasn't just another fading child star. No, he was pushed out, isolated, and ultimately broken by a system that chews up young black talent and spits them out when they no longer serve its purpose. But here's the real kicker, the most chilling part. Eddie Griffin revealed that Malcolm's story isn't unique. It's just one of the few that hasn't been fully exposed. Next, we're diving into how Malcolm was blackballed from the industry, the secret shady deals behind the scenes, and the painful pattern that continues to destroy young black actors in Hollywood. And trust us, this is the part they don't want you to know. After Eddie Griffin's explosive comments, fans began to piece together the truth that's been hiding in plain sight for years. Malcolm Jamal Warner didn't just fade into obscurity. He was silenced. Malcolm Jamal Warner didn't just fade into the background, he was pushed out. And the more you trace the timeline, the more disturbing it becomes. Let's rewind. When The Cosby Show wrapped in 1992, everyone assumed Malcolm was poised for He had it all: the talent, the charm, and that squeaky clean image Hollywood devours. But instead of stepping into blockbuster roles or landing high-profile series, Malcolm's career hit the brakes. Offers dried up. Major roles bypassed him. And when he did manage to land gigs, they were often underfunded, short-lived, or straight-to-DVD.Y. According to insiders, Malcolm had become a tough code to crack in Hollywood, someone who didn't play by their rules. He reportedly turned down sketchy contracts, refused to be a part of projects that didn't align with his values, and even butted heads with execs when he felt his work was being exploited or reduced to tokenism. But then came the real game changer: his refusal to publicly defend Bill Cosby when the scandal hit the media. While most of his castmates either stood by Bill or stayed silent, Malcolm took a firm and uncomfortable stance. Malcolm Jamal Warner hit us with the line of the century: "I'm not here to protect anyone, I'm here to protect what's right." While the public applauded him for his bold stance, certain industry power players were far from pleased. One anonymous producer told The Hollywood Tribune, Malcolm was blacklisted because he refused to play the game. He wouldn't fall in line, he wouldn't participate in the circus, and that's all it took. The irony? Malcolm wasn't arrested. He wasn't addicted. He didn't get caught up in a scandal. He was simply a man with principles. And in Hollywood, that's more dangerous than anything. Eddie Griffin echoed this sentiment, saying, "They knew Malcolm wasn't controllable, so they erased him quietly." No headlines, no outbursts, just silence, just silence. Around the same time, Malcolm began facing major financial troubles. Close friends revealed that he lost a significant chunk of his savings in a disastrous production company deal. Some even claimed the deal was set up to fail from the start. Another move in the calculated game to keep Malcolm from rising again. Investors, eager to make sure Malcolm Jamal Warner owed them big, set him up for failure. But it wasn't just the industry, it was also a personal betrayal. Malcolm's long-term relationship with actress Karen Molina White crumbled after nearly a decade together, though the exact reasons have never been disclosed. Sources close to the couple suggest that external pressures, both financial and career-related, created a tension that became impossible to manage. According to Eddie Griffin, this is when Malcolm completely retreated from the spotlight. He started turning down interviews, dodging red carpets, and eventually stopped auditioning altogether for a time. Meanwhile, the public, oblivious to the turmoil happening behind closed doors, assumed he had just moved on. But he hadn't. He was broken, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Eddie described it perfectly. They stripped that man's dignity from the inside out. And the saddest part? Nobody checked on him. Not a single person said, "Yo, Malcolm, you good?" While the world kept quoting Theo Huxtable and rerunning The Cosby Show, the man behind that iconic role was quietly suffering in silence. The same industry that made Malcolm Jamal Warner a star watched him fall and did absolutely nothing. But here's the real kicker: Malcolm's story isn't some rare anomaly. No, it's part of a much larger, much uglier pattern. And in the next section, we're about to expose how Hollywood has continuously chewed up and spit out black male talent, and why Eddie Griffin believes it's all part of a deliberate plan. You won't believe who else is on that list. Just when fans thought Eddie Griffin's comments about Malcolm Jamal Warner couldn't get any deeper, he dropped something that sent chills down everyone's spine. A list, in a separate interview, that resurfaced shortly after his viral podcast appearance. Eddie Griffin laid it out in plain terms. What happened to Malcolm didn't happen in a vacuum. It's a pattern. It's a blueprint. And if you think he's the only one, you're not paying attention. Then, he started naming names. He called out Orlando Brown, Gary Coleman, Jaleel White, Todd Bridges, and even Dave Chappelle. According to Eddie, all of them were targeted by the system. Once they stopped playing by the rules, they all had one thing in common. They were young, black, and talented, bringing millions to the entertainment industry only to be discarded, discredited, or labeled as crazy once they started asking questions or speaking the truth. Eddie Griffin asked the big question: why is it that every time a young black man speaks out, he suddenly has mental health issues? Why are they always broke, always angry, always in trouble? That's not a coincidence. That's a playbook. Then, he turned his focus back to Malcolm. Malcolm Jamal Warner didn't spiral the way some of his brothers did. But what's almost worse? He internalized it. And that's the silent killer. When they can't break you with drugs, they break you in your mind. They isolate you. They gaslight you. And they wait for you to disappear quietly. Malcolm didn't lash out. He didn't have public breakdowns. He didn't post wild videos or go on rants across social media. He simply faded into the shadows. And for Eddie Griffin, that's the real tragedy. The list of victims, he claims, just keeps growing. Eddie pointed out that up-and-coming talents who show promise but dare to push back against exploitative contracts or industry pressure often face silent retaliation. Roles get pulled last minute, actors are replaced without reason, they get labeled difficult to work with, or even blackballed by agents who whisper behind closed doors. Eddie even hinted at the existence of a quiet blacklist, a secret list passed around among Hollywood elites of names to avoid, not because of criminal records or poor performances, but because these people won't bow down. And guess who was definitely on that list? Malcolm Jamal Warner. Fans began revisiting Malcolm's recent interviews and public appearances, especially one from a 2022 podcast where Malcolm hinted at feeling alone in a crowded room and trusting the wrong people. Early in his career, at the time it seemed like just another industry gripe. But now, with Eddie's explosive claims in mind, those words hit a whole new, darker note. Eddie also questioned why Malcolm, a critically acclaimed actor who even snagged an NAACP Image award, never received directorial offers, big studio backing, or those Oscar-worthy roles others effortlessly got. Malcolm had the talent, the charisma, the experience. He should have had a career on the level of Denzel Washington. But instead, he was kept down. And that it wasn't random. It was calculated. Now, the burning question is, why? Was it because of his stance on Bill Cosby? Was it his refusal to become Hollywood's puppet? Or was it simply that Malcolm represented a kind of strength and independence that Hollywood finds downright threatening in a black man? In the next section, we'll dig even deeper into this mystery. The emotional toll this isolation took on Malcolm Jamal Warner was devastating, and those who were closest to him reveal that the man we saw on screen was a world apart from the quiet soul who lived behind closed doors. You'll soon hear gut-wrenching stories from friends, exes, and industry insiders that expose the internal war Malcolm fought every day until his final moments. To the public, Malcolm Jamal Warner always seemed polished, composed, and even a little mysterious. He wasn't the type to chase the spotlight, stay in the tabloids, or stir up drama on social media. But as Eddie Griffin hinted at, and those who truly knew Malcolm are now confirming, there was a side to him that fans never got to see. And trust me, it was heartbreakingly real. One former assistant who worked closely with Malcolm during the early 2000s described him as a man burdened with a weight that no one could see. She shared that there were times when Malcolm would lock himself away in his apartment for days, blinds drawn, phone turned off, ignoring all calls. It wasn't arrogance, it was exhaustion. The pressure to be perfect, to smile through the pain, and to constantly be the public Theo, while feeling completely unseen as the real Malcolm, was crushing. He'd often say they love Theo, but they don't care about Malcolm. And those words speak volumes. She heard him say that more than once, recalling it wasn't depression in the typical sense. It was emotional fatigue, the kind that comes from being celebrated for what you were, while being punished for what you refused to become. Every role he auditioned for after The Cosby Show seemed to want a watered-down version of Malcolm, or worse, a stereotype he refused to embody. One of his closest friends, an actor who wished to remain anonymous, shared a moment that still haunts him. "We were just chilling, having dinner," he said. And out of nowhere, Malcolm says, "You ever feel like you're at your own funeral and everybody's just pretending you're still here?" That was the darkest thing he'd ever heard from Malcolm, and he said it with a straight face. Malcolm's romantic life wasn't spared either. His nearly 10-year relationship with actress Karen Molina White ended quietly but painfully. Though neither ever publicly revealed the cause of their breakup, friends say that Malcolm's growing paranoia and emotional isolation created a rift between them. According to sources, he was constantly looking over his shoulder, unsure who he could trust, especially as he began to suspect that people around him were leaking private details to the press. At one point, Malcolm even contemplated walking away from the entertainment industry altogether. He told a former mentor that he wanted to disappear, change his name, and start teaching music or poetry in a quiet small town. His love for the arts never left him, though. In fact, it became his only true refuge. As acting opportunities dried up, he threw himself into spoken word, jazz, and intimate stage performances. Yet, even in those peaceful spaces, Malcolm couldn't escape the ever-looming shadow of what had been done to him. What Hollywood did to Malcolm Jamal Warner was nothing short of cruel. Even as audiences would still shout "Theo" in the crowd, booking agents tried to ride his Cosby fame to sell tickets, offering him mere pennies to perform. It was both flattering and dehumanizing at the same time. Eddie Griffin touched on this too. Imagine spending your whole life trying to evolve, only for them to keep calling you back to the kid you used to be. Malcolm was trapped in the world's memory of him, and he couldn't break free. And here's the saddest part. Malcolm never lashed out. He never exposed the people who betrayed him. He never wrote that explosive tell-all book that could have set the record straight. Instead, he internalized all the trauma, processed it in silence, and slowly distanced himself from the very world that once adored him. One of his closest musician collaborators said it best. Malcolm didn't want pity. He wanted peace. He wanted the truth. He wanted someone to see him, not Theo, not the product, but the man. And most of the world wasn't willing to do that. After sharing his truth about Malcolm Jamal Warner, Eddie Griffin didn't just drop the mic and walk away. He leaned in, and what he said next, it wasn't just a tribute. It was a warning shot to an industry that thrives on silence, exploitation, and the destruction of its own talent. Eddie closed his viral interview with a powerful statement. "Hollywood doesn't want you to be real. They want you to be useful. They'll use your smile, your skin, your pain, your talent. And then, ... they'll discard you when you stop smiling." That's exactly what happened to Malcolm Jamal Warner. And if you're not seeing the pattern yet, well, you're just not paying attention. Eddie Griffin dropped one final line that immediately went viral across social media. "Give that man his flowers, even if he ain't here to smell them." Fans, activists, and fellow actors began flooding the internet with tributes and stories. Using the hashtag flowers for Malcolm, people finally started speaking up about how The Cosby Show shaped their childhoods, how Malcolm inspired them, and how they never realized the depth of his suffering behind closed doors. Several celebrities, including former child stars and Black performers who had faced similar mistreatment in the industry, began backing up Eddie's claims. Some even hinted that Malcolm's quiet suffering was something they personally witnessed but felt powerless to stop. One actor wrote on X, formerly Twitter, "We all knew something was off with how Malcolm just vanished. I saw the pain in his eyes, but we all thought he'd bounce back. I hate that it took this long for folks to tell the truth." Even producers who once worked with Malcolm quietly began acknowledging the missed opportunities, the bad deals, and the unjust barriers he faced. No one wanted to name names directly, but the shift in tone was undeniable. It was as if Eddie Griffin's truth had finally cracked open a long-suppressed guilt in Hollywood's collective conscience. But the most powerful moment, an old video resurfaced, one that many had forgotten. In it, Malcolm is performing spoken word at a small, dimly lit venue. No fanfare, just him alone on stage. And he says, "You can be famous and still be invisible. You can be famous and still be invisible. You can be loved and still feel unloved. You can play the son America wanted and still never be seen as a man." That line hits different now, doesn't it? Eddie Griffin's bold confession has changed everything. The world is finally waking up to what was going on behind Malcolm Jamal Warner's quiet gaze, behind his reserved nature, and behind the decades of silence. It wasn't just his fame that disappeared, it was Malcolm himself. Malcolm Jamal Warner was so much more than Theo Huxtable. He was a gifted actor, a deep artist, and a man who paid the ultimate price for choosing principle over popularity. Eddie Griffin didn't just break the silence, he exposed a wound that Hollywood has been desperately trying to hide. Now, it's up to us to remember, reflect, and demand better. Not just for Malcolm, but for every voice that's been silenced, every career that's been destroyed, and every artist who's had to suffer in silence while the world cheered on their image. If this story moved you, if it opened your eyes or made you question what you thought you knew, then now's the time to act. Drop a comment below. What do you think really happened to Malcolm Jamal Warner? Smash that like button if you believe the truth deserves to be heard. Subscribe for more deep dive exposés on the stories the mainstream media refuses to touch. And share this video with friends, family, or anyone who still remembers The Cosby Show.